Mekhi Blackmon injured early in training camp, so what happens now? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day each and every day. Also, welcome into everybody who was maybe out of things for the offseason, coming back into camp. We got a whole bunch of camp notes as camp has opened, including the injury to Mekhi Blackmon, some depth chart stuff, so we've got a lot to talk about. Welcome in. If you like this show, you can find it anywhere Monday through Friday where you listen to podcasts. Just search out Locked On Vikings. You can also find it on YouTube or on Amazon Fire and Roku if you download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Today on the show, I want to go over a number of things. We still don't have full Christian Darrisaw details. I'll get you those when we get them. But that doesn't mean we don't have a lot of stuff to talk about. We got depth chart things. Blake Brandel is starting as expected, if you were paying attention. We also have, of course, the injury to Mekhi Blackmon, which is where I'm going to start today. Mekhi Blackmon towards ACL on the first practice. Huge bummer, right? Sucks for him. He was really poised to take another step, not only because of what he did last year. You go, okay, as a rookie, like good for a rookie, basically was the vibe that I got off of Mekhi Blackmon. Good for a rookie, want to see the next step, but he had every opportunity to. And the way that cornerback room was constructed, the plan really was open for the most preferred situation would be Mekhi Blackmon playing on the inside with Byron Murphy on the outside. That is no longer an option. He tears his ACL. He goes down during a drill, and it looks bad immediately. He gets up. He walks off. News that it's an ACL comes out not too long later. So this sucks, and it adds another challenge to a story that had some challenges in it. Also, speaking of stories with challenges in it, we got another JUCO kid on the Everyman series, which if you're a Minnesota football party watcher, we got one. We missed one. So that'll come up next. Or that'll come up later in the show. But here's the lasting impact of this, right? For Mekhi Blackmon himself, it is rehab and we'll see you next year, right? And we'll see what we get out of him next year. But now we got to figure this out. So there's a lot of people panicking and bringing up the like over the cap free agent list to see who you can bring in. And I got bad news about people who are still on the list on July 24th. That guy's probably not going to be very good. And a lot of the names that I've been hearing, I'm not a big fan of. I'm actually going to get to some of those names a little later. But essentially, here's how the group was constructed. If you haven't been following the Vikings over this offseason, here's the deal. You had Shaq Griffin. He's playing outside right now. He's taking first-team reps outside. He looks pretty much set up to start. And then you had Byron Murphy. He can play outside or inside. And I think that they prefer him on the outside, even though that means that there are bigger matchups. Like, he's always played a style of corner where he can survive that. So you like him on the outside. And then on the inside, ideally you wanted Mekhi Blackmon. Now, there was still a world that the Vikings were absolutely exposed to where Mekhi Blackmon didn't take that step forward. And they were okay with exposing themselves to that scenario, in which case you have somebody else playing outside opposite Shaq Griffin, like Andrew Booth or a Caleb Evans, or maybe even Duke Shelley, who is smaller and looks like a slot, but definitely is better on the outside than he is in the slot. So that's an option there as well. And then Byron Murphy plays inside, which is not best for him. Outside, I think, is still best for Murphy. And Mekhi Blackmon playing inside, I think was the scenario I liked the most. So it's a bummer that we don't get to have access to that scenario anymore. But I don't know if the Vikings go out and like make some big panic trade or anything like that, because they weren't even sure he was going to start. If it were Byron Murphy getting hurt and, oh my God, we don't have a starting corner now, then maybe you go do something. But Blackmon was in competition. He was a possible outcome, but there are still other possible outcomes. Like you could still end up where you would have ended up anyways if the competition went a certain way. And so I don't know if they're going to be quite as uncomfortable as you as fans are. I also don't know if they're right about that. I have been complaining about this cornerback group for basically the entire time I have been the host of Locked On Vikings, which I started in late 2018. 2019 was the first full year I covered the Vikings, and that was the year Xavier Rhodes kind of fell off. And like, they've been a disaster in that room ever since. And I don't blame you if you've run out of patience with these kind of Band-Aid veterans and 2-year deals and 3rd round and 4th round picks. You know, I mean, there was one 1st round pick in the last 5 years. That was Jeff Gladney, which not exactly their fault that didn't work out. But for a team that not so long ago, the meme was that they always draft corners and, Zimmer's drafting another corner. And people got mad about it. People were upset in 2019 if they didn't draft a corner and still kind of haven't wanted them to draft a corner. Well, it's time to draft 3 corners for 3 years in a row because this group is a disaster. And it's not the only hole on the roster for sure. There's other holes as well. This is not a finished roster by any stretch of the imagination. That's just the year that we're in. That's what you get. You know, new GM that out with Kirk out, finally committing kind of fully to rebuilding things. That's just where we're going to be at. This will be a test of everyone's patience. It's a bad group. And it's a bad group that just got worse. Not to mention losing Kyrie Jackson obviously has an impact. That's not what anybody's going to talk about when they're talking about that tragedy. Well, I guess I shouldn't say not everybody, but that is a different point. But what was built to be a robust competition is essentially now Andrew Booth, Caleb Evans, and Duke Shelley. And I don't know how serious of a part of things Duke Shelley is. But the path to the roster obviously is a lot more open for those guys as well as other DBs like Lewis Seen. That, you know, maybe they're going to keep an extra safety now because they have one less corner on the roster that they feel good about. And, you know, you can kind of try to solve the problem with like rotations and stuff. So what do we do here about this situation? That's the next question, right? Like, what happens now? And the odds-on favorite answer might be nothing. It might be, okay, well, all right, Andrew Booth, step up. Go play with the ones. He got smoked by Justin Jefferson on a big, long touchdown. For me, when it comes to camp especially, singular reps don't matter that much, but reps against Justin Jefferson don't count, okay? When you're going up against Jefferson, you're hanging on for dear life. You're just trying to survive, okay? Reps against Jefferson don't count. Don't hold that against him. Everybody gets dusted by Justin Jefferson. All pros get smoked by Justin Jefferson on post routes. But he was fired up. He took that big bomb from Sam Darnold, who appeared to have a pretty good day. Jefferson was pretty fired up about the whole day. He was like, oh man, he was throwing bombs out there. So that's exciting. Good start. Good note to start camp out on. But obviously we've got a long way to go. But it's got to be Booth. It has to be maybe a Caleb Evans gets out of his head from the way that 2023 ended for him. You just hope that was a short-term blip and all right, yep, he lost it and maybe he can get it back after an off season and kind of calm down, grow up a little bit. And then, you've got like Duke Shelley, maybe, or you have an external option. That I guess is the next part of this is what if they go out and get somebody? And there's 2 options here. You can go through the list of free agents, but I'm going to be honest with you. None of these guys take the starting job for me. And I know that's maybe insane to say about somebody like Stephon Gilmore, who's probably the closest thing to me as like a serious option, but he's like 34. You've got the corpse of Xavier Howard, and you'd have to get over some off-field stuff. He's a little bit radioactive right now, but he's also maybe the most washed guy, like name alive. Yeah, I know both those guys have familiarity with Flores from forever ago, but you need more than that to be a successful corner. And like, I don't know if those guys are better options than like the competition of Andrew Booth and Caleb Evans. It's a veteran presence or something like that. Patrick Peterson is still out there. That I wouldn't hate, although the quarters stuff that he's really thrived in the last couple of years isn't really what we do here, and that's why the Vikings let him go in 2023 in the first place and didn't try to re-sign him. There are other like deeply maligned names like Adoree Jackson, JC Jackson. These are guys that have had full-on meltdowns in coverage recently that make the Caleb Evans month of December look like reasonable starting play. And it's like, I don't know if you want to jump into bed with those guys. And like you eventually get down the list and you're maybe talking yourself into like Steven Nelson. I don't think that is a serious option. And the answer to this question might be that there are no good options. That happens sometimes. Like there's not a good player just sitting there on the waiver wire. This isn't your fantasy league with all your office friends that don't know what they're doing. There aren't going to be good players out here. There are going to be players that are old, that are coming off of injuries, that are flyers, that honestly might not even make teams at this point. You are not finding starters just like sitting there on the street on July 24th. And if you are, you're incredibly lucky. But what about maybe trading for a player? We'll get into that next and some other camp notes as well as the Everyman series. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime, the best place to find last-minute tickets for anything. Whether it's just a spontaneous idea, hey, let's go to a Twins game today, which one's on, can we get some tickets? You can find that on Gametime. You can save up to 60% off of tickets doing things that way because of the way the ticket market works, especially as you draw closer to the opening of the event and even an hour into the event. People are just trying to get rid of tickets, and you can take advantage of that and get great savings. Gametime knows how to take you through all that and find the awesome deals. They've got flash deals at the very tip top of their app that are like, it's big letters, you can't miss it, and you will find absolutely insane deals on those flash deals, as well as their zone deals, where you pick a section, and if you let Gametime pick the row for you, then you can find even better deals. You just give them that little bit of flexibility, and they can find the best deal for you. You can save so much money doing it that way, and they have the lowest price guarantee. If you find the same section and row for less somewhere else, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So save a little bit of money with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day each and every day. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out. When you're done here, you want more Minnesota sports talk, go check out Locked On Minnesota Sports, podcast feed, YouTube channel, all that good stuff. If the Vikings don't want to go out and grab some completely washed skeleton of a free agent, maybe they can try to trade for somebody. Obviously, who's on the trading block? Guys people don't want anymore. One name I've seen floated around is James Bradberry. People have said, hey, what about him? So here's the situation with him. I asked Louis over at Locked On Eagles, like, is he anything? And he was like, not washed. So also a bad idea. Look, another washed corner, but this one costs draft capital. So I'm not for it. But if you're curious, so the deal with James Bradberry kind of fell apart last year. He's playing second team safety now. Like, this dude is like en route to getting cut. So maybe there's a cut down day, send a seventh reclamation project angle here. But we're talking Jalen Reagors at this point with James Bradberry. I do not see it. And other trade block cornerbacks are hard to come by. There's not really anybody with a major contract dispute that I know of. I don't know. If you have other trade ideas, if you're watching on YouTube, let me know in the comments what your trade ideas are. I am certainly open to the idea of trading for a cornerback, but I will say, if you feel like the Vikings need to panic trade for a corner, you probably should have felt like that 24 hours ago before the injury happened. Because Mekhi Blackmon was one outcome, but he was competing for his job. And if you didn't win it naturally, we'd be in the exact same spot. And honestly, I wouldn't disagree with you. Been harping on it a lot. The Vikings should have done more at corner. And now here they are, even without the injuries that they've suffered. That's exacerbated what was already kind of an emergency that they ignored. And we don't need to let them get away with that just because bad luck made it worse than it already was. We can separate those two things. We can say this was a problem and we're critiquing you for that, but we're not going to blame you for the degree of the problem now that it got worse by factors that are additional that weren't your fault. The other issue, they have the cap for a trade. If they want to get somebody that, somebody's just trying to shed some cap or whatever, you don't see a lot of we just need to shed money in July or August. Usually everybody's pretty much got their money for the year figured out. That's something that you will see happen, in March or on draft day where, you're about to get a June 1st thing happen and you need to deal with that. But, this is not the time for cap casualties. This is the time for roster crunches and, cut candidates. But with cut candidates, it's also not all that common to find somebody that didn't make that guy's 53-man roster, but is good enough to start here. That's just sort of naturally runs counter to logic. It is a difficult problem to solve. And I honestly don't think that there's a good solution to it. I think they're just kind of up the creek without a paddle. And When you mess up and then bad luck makes it worse, you're just going to have bad corners. So you're probably going to have to scheme around it all year. Welcome to the Thunderdome, I guess. But corner is not the only thing happening at camp. There were a whole bunch of really cool, fun highlights. Everybody's super excited to get out there. So here's a couple of the major notes from the first day of camp that are worth going over. First off, Jordan Addison spoke to media a little bit for the first time since his DUI. He apologized. He said his arrest on suspicion of DUI. I should be very careful about my wording there. He opened it by being like, my lawyer says I shouldn't comment on that, which I know we're all mad at him, but that's so funny. I can't help it. I'm sorry. Cancel me if you have to, but that's so fun. Such a funny thing to say. Anyways, he owned up to it. He said all the right things. It was very platitude. It was very like coached up things to say. So I didn't find any of it particularly remarkable. I got to own up to my things. I got to be better, blah, blah, blah. A lot of empty words until they were followed with action. Or in Addison's case, I think the only way to win back the trust of a lot of people is to be, is to go a long time without having another issue, which sucks. Like there are some people like you can absolutely have taken the right steps to improve yourself, but people won't trust you now for years regardless, even if you deserve to be. So that's where he's at. But he's at camp. He's doing his thing. Justin Jefferson cooked everybody. That'll happen. Sam Darnold looked great. And then you had JJ McCarthy with the threes. So if you are a national reporter and you're tuning into Locked On Vikings to figure out what's going on with the Vikings and McCarthy on the threes, I encourage you to go further back in the library. Because here's the thing about the first day of camp. All the stuff that people are surprised about, Locked On Everydayers are not surprised about. We talked about all this. JJ McCarthy with the threes. We know why, right? He's in the slow cooker. He's incubating. He's working on a whole bunch of stuff. He's becoming a right foot back quarterback instead of an even foot quarterback. I talked about that a lot when I was evaluating Jaden Daniels. That was kind of the topic that I focused on during the Jaden Daniels scouting portion of my pre-draft stuff. So you can still go find all those episodes or a Patreon video if you prefer. There's also an article at Wide Left. I did a ton of stuff on that. Essentially, it changes the way that you drop back a little bit, and it lets you be a little bit more consistent. Whereas a lot of college quarterbacks will have square feet, will align their feet square because it helps when you're running a lot of options and when you're doing a lot of handing off out of the gun. But the Vikings don't run an option offense. Like if it's Kyler Murray, maybe I want him square because he's going to be doing a lot of options, or Caleb Williams is probably going to be doing a lot of options in Chicago and was at USC. I'm good with even there, but there's not really a great reason for McCarthy in Minnesota to be doing it. I wonder if Michigan did a little bit of read option there. I think there were a couple if I recall, so that was maybe what they wanted to do. But right foot back, it essentially, it helps a lot with your quick game. It helps you get quick game balls out faster and leads to just more consistency in your dropbacks. It's a really popular way to be in the pros. Jordan Love, Dak Prescott, Jared Goff, all right foot back quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins, interestingly, was a left foot back quarterback. The reasons for that, I think, are academically fascinating, and I will table them. You should go watch the Patreon video on Jaden Daniels for that, or read the Wide Left article. But that's one of the major mechanical changes. But that changes like everything. It changes the way you drop back. It changes the way you load up your passes. It changes everything. And you're going to miss a million passes in the meantime. He's with the threes, working through that. Because if you have a quarterback that's missing all his throws because he's changing his mechanics, I'm sorry, Lucky Jackson, but your practice is going to get ruined more than Justin Jefferson's practice is going to get ruined. That one's more important. Plus, if you have to halt practice and say, no, here's your mechanics thing and talk to him, which is absolutely worth the time, you want to do that to the threes who are, that's the practice you would prefer to interrupt. So that's why he's with the threes. That is by the plan. I don't think that there was ever a moment where they're like, God, I wish this guy could just play with the ones, but he's just not good enough. And I think a lot of national people will sort of jump to that conclusion. See a guy with the threes, he must be the third best quarterback. And I don't think that state of affairs will hold. I don't think anybody in their right mind is like, Nick Mullins is a better quarterback than JJ McCarthy, better cut him. Like, I don't think anybody really thinks that, right? Or thinks that state of affairs will hold at any point more than, the first few weeks of the season. So that it's in the incubator. We all just need to be patient, okay? If you expect JJ McCarthy to be the first team quarterback right now, you have the wrong idea about QB development, and you should go listen to some of the other episodes. We talked about this a lot over the summer. There's a ton that you can go back and listen to if you're interested in more than that. And then the other thing that I was surprised to see a few people in the reporting scene actually shocked by was that Blake Brandel was taking all the first team left guard reps. This has been the case since OTAs. This was a surprise in OTAs. He took all the left guard reps. He was not competing with anybody for it. Even after Dalton Risner arrived in the middle of OTAs, he still wasn't competing. Blake Brandel has the job. Dalton Risner is a backup. He's backup right guard right now, taking second team right guard reps. If that ever turns into a competition with Ed Ingram, I'll let you know. Some people have speculated about that. But to me, you're not in a competition if you're not taking first team reps. Except in like the fully formal sense of the word where everyone technically has an opportunity to win whatever job, like whatever. If you're not taking first team reps, you aren't competing for that job. And Dalton Risner is not competing for a starting job right now. If you expected him to like just show up and take his job back, then that was misguided. He's not anymore, and the Vikings have chosen a different guy. I too was a little confused by this when I kind of learned about it, and I actually did a whole Patreon video and an episode here about why would you look at the tape Blake Brandel put out and the tape Dalton Risner put out, at least as a Viking, and choose Brandel over Risner? And I think while I'm not 100% convinced, I can at least see where they're coming from with that. There were times when Brandel outplayed Risner, just like bar none, was just a better lineman. Try to forget about the name value and the draft pedigree for a second and just think like tape wise, Brandel's was better sometimes, but not all the time. So I'm still a little bit skeptical. Long way for all of this to go. A long way. It will work out. It will all work itself out, and we will have these answers. But we're not going to have these answers today. So instead, let's continue on with the Everyman series here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by eBay Motors. eBay Motors is a great place to find anything that your car needs, whether it's a supercharger or a roof rack or something like cosmetic because you want to style that thing out, or if you just need a part to keep it going, something under the hood, a little more responsible, whatever it is, your car gets you from point A to point B. You got to take care of it. So go to eBay Motors and check that thing out. eBay Motors has over 122 million parts for your car. And the eBay guarantee is that it will fit your ride the first time or your money back. So if you get a part and it's not for the right make or the right model, eBay gives you your money back. So go on over to ebaymotors.com and keep your ride or die alive. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. The Everyman series is a series here on Locked On Vikings where we go over the backstories of every single new Minnesota Viking, from undrafted rookies to prized free agent signings, their background, their journey to the NFL, and trying to get a sense for who they are as people and focus on the human side of the sport. The world of recruiting is fascinating. It is such an odd world of men in their 40s and 50s trying to court teenagers. It's so weird. It's what the system has to be. It's nobody's fault that it is that way, but it also is a really bad meritocracy, which is also nobody's fault. It's just the way it is. There are too many football players in the United States for any given program to be able to get their eyes on any of them. So you have to go where the hype takes you. You have to go to the schools that typically produce these people, and it creates this sort of almost like class system where if you're not at the right school and nobody sees you play, you can be as good as you want, but you're going to trade school after high school. There's nothing you can do about it. And so this happened to Jeremy Flax, who picked up football at a very young age and kind of fell in love with it so much to the point where his parents didn't really understand what kind of impact this was going to have on his life until much later. And he was a good player. He was a good enough player to be a D1 scholarship player. And this would be proven out eventually. But he didn't really know how to get out there. And he didn't go to a school. He was in the Detroit area. He didn't really go to a school where he was going to get eyeballs on him. And when you're at one of those schools, we've talked about a couple on the Everyman series here, where you have people taking road trips across the country to get to football camps, to get in front of one assistant coach from a D1 program, just to get your name talked about in the right group chats. But Jeremy Flax didn't really know how to do any of that. So he didn't go to any of the rivals camps. He didn't know he just played high school football. He did well, and then nobody called. So he had to go to Independence Community College. It's like dead even between Kansas City and Oklahoma City, like the southern kind of Montgomery County, a southern county in Kansas. And this is like Midland America. I encourage you to go to Google Maps, type in Independence Community College in Kansas, and just like look at the street view of this place. I mean, this is the most like generic middle America flatland place you could ever look at. It looks like there are nicer elementary schools. And that's what you get with a community college football program, right? You are not going to get the glitz and glamour of D1. But what you are going to get at a community college is a program that knows how to get your name in front of Division I college recruiters. So when Jeremy Flack shows up and he just like blasts everybody into next week because he's a D1 player at this tiny little community college playing amongst, community college level competition. If you play that well, and then you get in front of recruiters, suddenly interest. He was like the 8th best prospect, JUCO prospect he was a 4-star JUCO prospect, 8th best O lineman in the country that year. So he was getting interest from everybody. He was suddenly getting calls. He was suddenly getting everything. Like he had absolutely proven the system wrong here. But it's really nobody's fault that it took this long. Except maybe, I don't know, the lack of a person telling Jeremy Flax that he had to get out to a rivals camp so that he could get in front of somebody and, get an advisor that tells him, hey, here's how you get college attention. Or maybe that's fine. He had to spend a couple years in JUCO. It is what it is. In particular, Kentucky and Coach Stoops really endears him. They'll actually send a contingent to his mom's work. His mom works as an elementary school teacher. And they actually, like, all the Kentucky coaches came in and, the program in that area of the country is, a college football coach coming in and visiting. And, it's like super exciting because teacher's son is blah, blah, blah. So they were all really, really excited. They read to the kids. It was this really fun day. And it was that extra mile that they went that made Jeremy Flax feel welcome, feel like part of the family, and ultimately commit to Kentucky. In 2020 was his first year, so we got the weirdness of the COVID year. But in that year, he's still kind of a backup, not quite like a redshirt freshman kind of thing. He does play a couple of games. I don't know if they actually officially redshirted him or not, but regardless, they kind of expected him in 2021 to take that next step forward and be the starter. But then things got a little bit weird. A transfer tackle came in, and then there was another guy that was hurt that came back from injury, and suddenly left tackle, right tackle was set, and Jeremy Flax at tackle had nowhere to go, and he sat on the bench. He did an interview, which is where I'm getting a lot of this information, with a local news outlet, and they asked him, like, so what happened? And he says, hey, like, this is on me a little bit. He said he had some personal stuff going on, which no details out there about that, but it doesn't matter. Personal, it's good enough, right? There's some personal stuff going on. But also he kind of talks about consistency. Like, he wasn't the same guy every practice. If he showed up at one practice, he would struggle. Showed up at another practice, he did great. And the coaches aren't going to trust a guy that's a day-to-day proposition, right? So he says, I don't have any problem with competition. I had this going on. I wasn't my best self. I lost the competition. I'm at peace with that. But the next year, those guys are gone, and it should be his job to lose. He takes it in 2022, but in 2023, another transfer comes in from USC, and that guy was supposed to take his job. But this time it was a little different. He was a little more consistent. He was a little more focused. And even though that battle, and he rotated going into the season, even though that battle was prolonged, he eventually got the better of it. And he earned that starting job. And I think that gives you some bona fides as you head into the NFL. You're not going to get drafted being the JUCO kid that was fighting for your job the whole time. But as a 4-star JUCO kid, worth a flyer on kind of guy, you have every opportunity here. And as much as I would love to say, hey, you're in the NFL and it's a total meritocracy, go out, play someone, and get yourself on the team. That's a pretty tough ask. And realistically, we're looking at a practice squad player as the success outcome, and the failure outcome is, a check for your month of camp and thanks for your time, and a jersey you can put it in a shadow box at your office, selling life insurance. But the success outcome here is what he's fighting for, and he finds himself in a familiar situation, unheralded, walking into a world where nobody really thinks he's going to be the best guy there, with a chip on your shoulder and something to prove. We'll see what we get out of the kid. I'll talk to y'all tomorrow. And as always, Skol.